It's fantastic, and he rides a lot better than he walks.
Yes.
I don't think we'll ever know who made the decision. Is it one person? We feel that we deserve some answers.
It's going to be a really interesting episode. I'm Adam Cromarty. Welcome to another edition of Under the Saddle. If you haven't already done so, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, no matter whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on any of the major podcast platforms. Now, over the past season or so, we've had lots of riders, we've had grooms, we've had vets. We've never had a show organiser, and one event that you will no doubt have heard of is Hickstead. You know, it's been part of the sport for way longer than I can remember, and they've had a Nations Cup for about 50 years. But as you may have heard, there's a new format for Nations Cup. It's down to 4 events plus a final, making it 5, and, well, Hickstead's not going to be a part of those 5. And it's a real shame, but I know they've got big plans, and to talk about that and a whole lot more, we welcome Edward Bunn, one of the family that owns and operates Hickstead. Edward, it's great to chat to you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, nice to see you, Adam, too.
So first of all, let's kind of chat about you, because obviously you've grown up at Hickstead. What was sort of childhood like? What was it like growing up there?
Well, it was pretty idyllic. We were like free-range children during the school holidays. And occasionally, well, they used to have 4 horse shows or 5 horse shows in those days, and all these friends came to play.
Yeah.
And I remember many an hour with Robert and Stephen Smith, for example, playing up at the pool at Hickstead Place or down on the showground, pestering the fun fairs, Sweet Man. Yeah, it was idyllic.
And what age did you get to when the kind of play stopped and you had to get involved and actually start working?
Well, I'm trying to think. It's sort of arena party wise during the shows. I was about 14, 15, I suppose, during the school holidays. A bit before that, even at a younger age, sort of 12, I used to go off on a little Massey 35 tractor and do topping of the fields and for about 10p an hour. So we were, especially my mother, sort of generated a very good work ethic. So we were always helping around the place.
And was it always clear that this was going to be where you'd end up? You know, sort of career-wise?
No, well, it was for me. But as a family, my dad had another business, Bunn down at Selsey, holiday camps, and he was giving me pressure to go and work there. Which I really didn't have a lot of interest. It's 50 miles from home. It was a place that we didn't visit very often as children, and Hickstead was sort of grew up and was in my blood. So it was, in my mind, it was always going to be Hickstead. Dad tried to get me to go to Selsey, but in the end gave up, and I came here and I was in Australia, sort of doing a gap year, and he phoned up. 1983, I think, or 83-ish, and said, "Come home, I want you to run the show." So back I came, and I think my first show was a small show, and then we went straight into the European Championships. So it was a baptism of fire.
And pretty much the whole family still involved, all in different ways. Was it a kind of sort of sit-down meeting where you decided what your role would be? What Lizzie's role would be. How was that worked out?
Well, I started first in 83, so I was looking after, at 22 years old, everything outside the office. And we had Anita Arnett was the secretary then, whose partner was Kevin Bacon, the famous Australian show jumper. And then she retired in 86, 87, and we were looking around, Dad was looking around for other people, and Lizzie was staring us in the face she was 21, 22. And I said to Dad, why don't we have Lizzie? So he rang her up and said, start work on Monday. She said, I'll think about it. And the rest is history.
And some of the other family members are involved, but in a smaller way. But do they still come to sort of family meetings and stuff? Are they involved with the sort of decisions around Hickstead?
Yeah, there's a board of 6. Dad's 6 youngest children. So there's myself, Lizzie, who are the day-to-day custodians of Hickstead. Then there's my brother John, who was spent a lot of his life at Chelsea doing the job that my dad wanted me to do. And he still oversees the account side. And then we've got Chloe, who's married to Shane, Chloe Breen, and Daisy and Charlie, who are all directors. We have regular meetings throughout the year, but Lizzie and I are left to do the day-to-day running. Any big decisions, which there'll be a few coming up soon, it's always put to the board.
And what's your kind of biggest memories of change over the years? How has the showground developed?
Well, I think show jumping has developed. If you go back 30 years, the horses were different. I think there were more Irish sort of bigger horses like the Ryan Sons, the Apollos. So the fences, the show jumps were more substantial. We used to jump a lot of 17'6" wide fences, quite heavy poles, deep cuts. And over the years, they've got lighter, narrower, safer. You know, the FEI safety cut, which is probably the best decision the FEI ever made, was bringing in the safety cut on the back bars of oxes. So that has changed. The horses have become lighter, and I think the biggest change probably is the riders are more serious. They're athletes. They prepare properly. If you look at Ben or Scott, or their attitude to the sport is completely different to what, say, Tom Brake, some of the older generation, even Harvey and David. Whereas now they're consummate athletes.
And something that Hickstead's always been known for is that main arena, the international arena there. Obviously still very much a grass surface. Was there ever any discussion, as the sport does continue to evolve and change, has anyone ever dared to say, how about putting an all-weather surface in there?
No.
It kind of is all-weather, really, though.
It is. It's an all-weather grass arena now. We renovated it in 2010, and basically dug down a foot, moved the best topsoil to one side, built it like an all-weather dressage arena or an all-weather show jumping arena, put lots of drains in underneath, then put a big layer of stone in, put the soil back on, the best of the topsoil, then incorporated 3,000 tonnes of sand into it. So it's a very light, well-drained soil, and there's 10 inches of the soil on top. So wherever you are in the arena, you're no further than 10 inches away from a drain. And we work the ground. We have a verti-drain machine, which is like a big spiky machine that spikes down. The spikes are conveniently 10 inches or 12 inches long. So when we verti-drain, we hit down to the gravel, which means there's a vertical tube from the top of the ground to right into the drain. So drainage-wise, it's 100%. And yes, it was probably the best decision we ever made.
And in terms of the work you have to do to that arena now, are there any times of the year where you just kind of leave it to do its thing, or are you constantly working on that arena, even when there's not events on?
Through the winter, so our jumping season finishes the second week of September. We'll do quite a heavy renovation program. We'll harrow or scarify the arena heavily, pull out a lot of dead grass, old grass, the clippings that are built up over the summer. We'll then clear that away with sweepers or a mower that picks up. Then we do a lot of reseeding, so we put on, we're a 1.8 hectare arena, we put on, trying to work it out, probably 450 to 500 kilos of grass seed sown in with a seeder. Right. And then it's left to grow, a bit of fertiliser, and then sometimes we get depending on the weather, sometimes we get a cut off it of grass, but we tend to put it to sleep about November time. Don't do a lot with it, let the grass go through its normal winter cycle of not growing and sort of stabilising, and then as soon as we can get on it in the spring, we're on it, and it's cut 3 times a week, fertilised, verti-drained, decompacted, swept, harrowed. It's a constant. It's one person's job, and he's probably on it 2/3 of the week doing something.
And you mentioned about the horses changing and stuff, and there's a number of key events, but one of that's kind of the most famous would be the Hickstead Derby meeting. Do you think there's a risk to the Derby, and not just the Hickstead Derby, derbies around the world, that we don't really have these types of horses anymore? Because your Derby course has been the same for years, hasn't it?
It's been the same for years, but it's been modified. We changed the angle of the face of the bank 25 years ago. So actually a horse can nearly walk down it. Before it was near vertical at the beginning. Then it was pulled out a bit in the 70s, and then we adjusted it again, probably 30 years ago, to be honest. So a horse can nearly walk all the way down the bank. And people walk up it in the evenings or run up it. But it's still a spectacle, so we haven't changed the spectacle, but we've made things safer. As I said earlier on, the safety cup has made a huge difference. Lighter poles, better poles. We buy a lot of our jumping poles now from Germany, which are a laminated wood construction and very dry, kiln dried, so that the weight of them is considerably lighter. And Shane Bree, my brother-in-law, has jumped a Grand Prix horse in it. Billy Buckingham, who won it, was a Grand Prix horse, and he went to the World Equestrian Games in Tryon. So it's not specifically a Derby horse. There are a lot of funnies. There's the Dyke and there's the Double of Ditches and the Big Open Ditch. But it's still, the important thing is it's still a spectacle to the public. I think the Derbies this year, we had 3 clear rounds. William Funnell had 2 of them. And got pipped by David Simpson, but it's still one of the iconic classes in the world, and I think the future for it is good.
And then we've got to talk about the Royal International, because the Nations Cup series has obviously been in the equestrian news with the change of a format. When did you first become aware that the Nations Cup format was changing and they were going to reduce the number of events?
Well, we went to an FEI conference in Lausanne before Christmas, sort of, I can't think, it was late November or December, and the new proposal was put to us as a group of organisers. There was chefs of keeps, organisers, federations, and we were told that the existing format, which was 6 events and 8 nations, wasn't sustainable. Probably driven by sponsorship requirements, and they were going to change it. They also lost the FEI out the series, lost Aachen, they lost Rome, and they lost La Baule. So it was down to six world-class venues, all within Europe. They wanted to go global, so they said we are going to reduce the number of events, increase the prize money in the Nations Cup, I think, to a £700,000 pot for each event, and you'll need to tender for them or put in for them. This was over a period of March. We had a second meeting, I think, with on Zoom, and we got the document to tender. We filled it out and we sent it off with apparently 18 other venues. Then we don't know who. There was a small committee somewhere, we don't know who was on it, came up with a proposal that was ratified by the board on Monday this week, and lo and behold, there's only 4 venues been chosen: Abu Dhabi, Ocala, Rotterdam and St Gallen. We completely understand why St Gallen have been picked, because it's Longines sponsoring it, and they're Swiss, and it's a Swiss venue. Rotterdam is a very good show. It's been hosting Nations Cups like we have for many years. This would have been, or next year would have been, our 50th year of running the Nations Cup. Abu Dhabi run a low-level Nations Cup at the moment, but they want to make it global. And Ocala, which is a fantastic venue in Florida. I don't know how proven the organising committee are, and I think there's been some friction in the past with the USET, but it's a fantastic venue. The facilities are fantastic, and we thought it would go there, but we always hoped that another traditional horse show in Europe, whether it be us or Falsterbo, would get the fifth leg, but they've decided because of the Olympics next year not to run a fifth leg. They're going to just run four, with another leg coming in 2025.
And obviously so much work goes into these tenders and stuff, so I mean all these organisers have spent so much work. Do you think there needs to be more kind of transparency so that you know who made the decision, what the criteria was, and have you been told, are these shows going to kind of rotate round, or how long is it set for? It's
a 3 or 4 year contract that they have. It would be nice to know, to get feedback on why we weren't chosen, yes. I don't think we'll ever know who made the decision. Is it one person? Is it a group of people? We know it went to the board. The decision was delayed a week, and then it went to the board on Monday for ratification. So the board didn't make the decision. So there must have been somebody somewhere or a group of people somewhere. And was it made on for the best sponsorship? The commercial reason. How much did Longines have to put into it? Was it made for the best interest of the sport? Horses, horse welfare? It's a mystery, and I suppose one day it will come out. The British Federation are trying to get answers.
And what was that kind of feeling like when you heard the news? Because this has been part of Hickstead's makeup for, 50 years now? Yeah,
we've run Nations Cups for 50 years, and the important thing to say is we are going to continue running Nations Cups, because all it is we're not part of a series.
Yeah,
Aachen run a Nations Cup as part of their festival. Rome run a Nations Cup still. La Baule is running a Nations Cup, but they're all standalone events. Calgary runs a Nations Cup.
Yeah,
and Hickstead will continue to run a Nations Cup, but it's. I don't know. We've been very loyal to the FEI through thick and thin. When years where there hasn't been sponsorship, and we've had to fund some of it ourselves with support of the FEI, and we feel that we deserve some answers.
Yeah, no, for sure. And do you think it's going to affect the riders as well? Because when you had a couple more Nations Cups, you could afford to maybe send, an extra young rider on the team.
Exactly.
But now, as I understand it, you have to go, the nations have to go to every single event, and really they have to send their best team.
Well, everything counts. Every venue counts. It's the EEF have this series below, which is mainly 3-star, 145. That's a big step to 160.
Yeah.
I don't know if. I'm not sure if they're creating another elite level as the Global Tour does. The riders that go to these big shows will earn good money. They'll earn good Longines world ranking points, so they will stay up at the top. There's no encouragement, or that we have seen, to help younger riders come through. And one of the proposals that was put by organisers and chefs was that maybe you have a team of 5 and one of the riders has to be under 25. So you can bring in, and I don't know if they're going to adopt that or not, but it's a big step up to suddenly go and jump for your country at that level where everything counts. And I think they're changing the rules. So it's 4 and a drop score in the first round, but then the second round is 3 riders, no drop score, which again is a lot of pressure, and a lot of pressure on the chef to pick the right one.
Yeah, no, for sure. But as you mentioned, Hickstead is still going to have that Nations Cup. I did the one at Spruce Meadows. It's part of their Rolex Grand Slam show. You mentioned Aachen. I think their Nations Cup's also within that same show with their Rolex Grand Slam. How are you going to attract the riders to a Nations Cup show? Because I think, these big venues have got maybe a Grand Prix. The Spruce Meadows one's $3 million or something. Are we going to see something kind of new and exciting alongside a Nations Cup?
Well, let's hope so. We are talking to stakeholders. We are hoping to attract a sponsor with a decent Grand Prix, but £200,000 to £500,000 worth of prize money. and then have a Nations Cup maybe at the current level now, £200,000 worth of prize money. Well, that's a serious show.
Yeah.
I think money talks. I think Longines ranking points make a difference, because we've also got the hindrance slightly of Brexit and the importation of horses into the UK from France and getting them back into France, because it's suddenly, since Brexit, become a very costly business.
Do you think that's something that's going to ease? I'm sure you've been keeping an eye on it.
I'd hope so. We hope so. And being involved, my daughter rides for the Billy Stud and William Funnell and Shane Breen's here. It's the way horses move across the border. That the day of Brexit, we suddenly became the pariah of Europe, and we have to take extra measures and different tests for diseases that haven't existed in this country because we are a part of Europe, and basically all we did was left a trade agreement. So it just makes it harder and more awkward. There is lots of lobbying going on via the British Horse Society, BEF, DEFRA, trying to make it a better process, and I think it will come eventually, but I think they're still a bit bitter. And
there's always something happening at Hickstead. You're always improving something. What's going to be the future? How's Hickstead going to be in the next 5-10 years? Is there anything kind of exciting in the pipeline that you?
We're just about to. We've got planning permission in for 204 new stables up in the stable field, in American barn type stables for our international horses. So they're inside on concrete. We're well aware of biosecurity. So we're planning those over the winter, which will get used for other events as well. But we can maintain a much better environment for the horses rather than being on grass in a field, and when it gets wet, it gets muddy. So we're doing that. We're always looking at different things. We do a big national show in September, or at the end of August, beginning of September, which we increased to a 2-week tour a few years ago. That's coming up. That's very popular. So. Hickstead is thriving. We have always had a few hiccups on the way, but I'm sure this is not a setback. This is a chance to reset, and it's the new beginning.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. We've got some quick fire questions though for you before we let you go. So first one is your horse idol. What horse kind of sticks out for you?
Well, I've got two. Okay. Just to be different. Billy Buckingham. This is a horse that my daughter produced through the Billy Stud for William, and he took over the ride and won the Derby. And the other one is Billy Nikon, which is the horse that my daughter Lucy rode to win the Fox Hunter at the Horse of the Year show a couple of years ago. So they're my two. Okay,
and what about rider idol? Aside from your daughter, maybe we should say.
Apart from my daughter, yes. Up to last week, it was Nick Skelton, who was a genius and was a genius. But after watching John Whittaker ride the winning round in the Nations Cup last week at 67 years old, I've sort of changed to John Whittaker.
It's amazing to watch John, because I think he's riding just as well, now as he was way back when.
It's fantastic, and he rides a lot better than he walks.
Yes.
Horses change when he gets on their back, and it's amazing. It's just the most wonderful thing to watch, and it's everybody's got the greatest of all times, but John Whittaker has to be one of them. He's the equivalent of Jimmy Anderson in cricket, or Tom Brady in American football. His longevity is amazing, and every year he comes out and he performs, and it's just amazing.
No, for sure. Best advice you've ever been given?
This came from John Roach at the FEI when he was the show jumping director, and was to rip up the main ring, redrain it like Dublin had done, and secure the future of Hickstead forever. So it was John that pushed us to do it. It was a year after Dad died. We sold his wine collection and ploughed it into the ground.
How much did it cost to do that ring?
Between £800,000 and £900,000.
Why?
But it was money well spent. Last weekend, on the Wednesday, we had over half an inch of rain overnight. Finished at 7 o'clock in the morning. The first international class started at 9 o'clock, and the ground was perfect. And the foreign riders who hadn't been here before, some of the Brazilians and Italians, just could not believe how wonderful, how great it was. And the winning horse actually was 61st to go. And he said the ground was fantastic. He'd never seen anything like it.
I mean, and all the riders rant and rave about it. I bet there's some people sitting in the stands, though, that just think it's a patch of grass that you maybe mow a week before.
Well, that's it. And actually, you know, if you go to Hickstead before we did it, we ploughed all the money into the ground, reseeded it, kept all the levels, the slopes, permanent fences, and you came back for the following season, you wouldn't have known we'd spent any money. You know, you just think, well, it's the same bit of ground. But scientifically, and we have a genius of a man called Richard Hayden who did Dublin, he's done Hickstead and Cian O'Connor's place in Ireland, that came up with this concept of what they call the gravel raft, and it's just fantastic. And whatever you throw at it weather-wise, we've done filming for. We did a series called The Crown on Netflix, and we had a pretend horse show here in January, February one winter, with horses jumping, and it was perfect even at that time of year.
Yeah, I bet that was the easiest horse show you've ever ran, and probably one of the most profitable.
Yes. It was the most lucrative, yes. And the Queen was here, yes.
Exactly.
Yes, it was very funny that one of our members of staff was called up to the box, which was the royal box for the series, and walks into. They had a problem anyway. He went up there to try and sort it out, and he walked in, and I can't remember the name of the actress that was playing the Queen. She was stood there, and he actually bowed to her. No, it was after Claire Foy. It was, and he bowed. Your Majesty, you know, and he said it was, you know, very surreal.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
It was this is a long time ago, and it was just after I started, and the advice wasn't given to me, but it was given to Hickstead. It was to replace the fertiliser we used on the rings with chicken manure.
Oh.
And it was a disaster. The rings were terrible. The first horse into ring 3 was Joe Fargis. The American team were here. Joe Fargis came around the corner, slipped, and broke his leg.
Right.
And it was just a disaster. I remember it thinking, what have we done? And overnight we managed to get lots and lots of sand from Red Hill, where they did the sand pit, and the guys spent the night spreading sand on the rings to give it a bit of cohesion, because it was just a skid pan. It was a disaster.
And aside from that, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made?
Well, apart from that, a few years ago, a week before the Derby, it was quite dry, and the bank was starting to change colour. The face of the grass was getting a bit under stress. So I sent a lad out to water it, and I said, just give it plenty of water, and we'll try and keep this green. And it's a clay face on the bank with a wall at the back, and I came down in the morning and the front of the bank had slipped off because it got too wet, and it was a week before the Derby, which amazingly we got a good team here. We put the clay back up, paddled it all back in again, got more turf. It looked a bit rough, and it rode quite well. It didn't affect the spectacle of the class anyway. But so my biggest mistake was allowing the bank to be overwatered and ending up with a face falling off it.
Well, Edward, thanks again. It's really good to talk to you. I haven't been to Hickstead for a few years, so hopefully I'll make it there.
Come and see us
soon.
Come and see us.
Yeah, definitely. And give my best to Lizzie and the rest of the family.
Thanks, Adam, and nice to talk to you.
Well, once again, a big thank you there to Edward. I can't wait to see what he and the rest of the Bunn family have in store, but I'm sure there's plenty of exciting things in the pipeline at Hickstead, and we've got lots of exciting guests still to come on this season of Under the Saddle, so if you haven't already done so, make sure, and final reminder till, well, the next one, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you want to suggest guests, if there's someone that you're desperate to hear from, or you just want to say hello, you can find me on social media. I'm on all the platforms. Just search Adam Cromarty. And until the next time, take care. We'll see you back here on Under the Saddle.